Shell has tried to say that if anything bad happened in Nigeria, it didn't have to do with them. That's just not how it was conducting business. In a country like Nigeria, the power that that multinational had was enormous. In so many ways, it was calling the shots.
On May 26, 2009, a landmark trial will open in federal court in New York City. Multinational oil giant Royal Dutch Shell will stand trial, charged with complicity in egregious human rights abuses in Nigeria. Shell first began production in Nigeria more than 50 years ago, and its legacy in the oil-rich and densely populated Niger Delta region has long been one of environmental devastation and human suffering.
Ogoni is the land, the people Ogoni. The agony of trees dying in ancestral farmlands, streams polluting, weeping filth into murky rivers. It is the poisoned air causing the luckless lungs of dying children. Ogoni is the dream breaking the looping chain around the drooping neck of a shell-shocked land.
In 1990, amidst poverty, environmental ruin, and the oppression of life under a brutal military dictatorship, a popular nonviolent movement burst forth from the Ogoni region of the Niger Delta to challenge Shell and demand an end to the exploitation and abuse of the Ogoni land and people.
The United Nations recognizes the rights of all the world's indigenous people. Indigenous people have been cheated through laws such as are operated in Nigeria today. Through political marginalization, they have driven certain people to death. In recovering the money that has been stolen from us, I do not want any blood spilt, not of an Ogoni man, not of any strangers amongst us. We are going to demand our rights peacefully, non-violently, and we shall win.
Ken Saro-Wiwa was an acclaimed writer, environmental activist, and leader of the Movement for the Survival of the Ogoni People, or MOSOP.
And on behalf of the Movement for the Survival of the Ogoni People, MOSOP, I say, welcome to our shell-shocked land.
On January 4, 1993, an estimated 300,000 Ogoni, a staggering 3/5 of the population, joined a massive protest march to mark the beginning of the UN's International Year of the World's Indigenous People. MOSOP called it Ogoni Day. The Ogoni environmental justice and human rights movement was growing fast, but Shell executives' alarm about the impact of this movement was growing just as quickly. Shell became determined to see this opposition stamped out.
Shell partnered with the brutal Nigerian military government to suppress the popular movement of the Ogoni people. On multiple occasions, Shell paid the Nigerian military. They requested the Nigerian military, knowing that it was a brutal force, and that force committed horrific acts of violence against civilians who were peacefully protesting.
It's not a case where the corporation was doing its best in a country which did bad things. The company and the military dictatorship were working hand in hand.
In one incident in which Shell faces charges, soldiers requested by and escorting Shell shot and killed Webari Nana in the Ogoni village of Korokoro, and afterwards Shell paid the soldiers and praised them for their so-called restraint. Webari's brother James is a plaintiff in the lawsuit. In another incident, Shell's contractor brought in soldiers as it laid an oil pipeline for Shell through Ogoni farmland. They paid the soldiers who shot surviving plaintiff Karololo Kobara. By the summer of 1993, the Nigerian military was waging a brutal campaign of violence to suppress the Ogoni. In 1993 and 94, villages throughout Ogoni were attacked and terrorized. Hundreds of people were killed, and many thousands more were driven from their homes.
We find it difficult to go back to our homes and houses, because the soldiers at any time They see anybody outside, they shoot.
It was a dark time in Ogoni, but MOSOP continued its organizing efforts, and Ken Saro-Wiwa worked to raise global awareness and rally support for the Ogoni cause around the world.
Multiple letters from Shell to the Nigerian military government made it clear that Shell wanted the government to take care of Ken Saro-Wiwa and the Ogoni leadership, which it viewed as a serious problem.
Most of leadership that was part of this game must be arrested, and the security forces are out doing just that.
The Nigerian military finally found justification to arrest Saro-Wiwa and the MOSOP leaders when 4 prominent Ogoni chiefs were tragically killed in an incident many suspect was orchestrated by the military itself.
His alleged crime: arranging the murder of 4 of his closest associates during a mob riot on the 21st of May last year. Barely 5 hours after those horrific lynchings, my father was arrested. He was held in leg irons, tortured, and denied access to family, friends, and legal counsel. After 9 months of this treatment, he was finally charged and brought before a special military tribunal. My father's real crime has been to organize the successful and non-violent struggle against the exploitation of Nigeria's Ogoni people and lands by Shell Oil Company and the Nigerian government.
Ultimately, Shell's lawyers conspired with the prosecution of the Ogoni leadership and participated in bribing witnesses against the Ogoni Nine and securing their convictions. And of course, they were ultimately executed.
The Nigerian military announced this week that my father and 8 others have been sentenced to death. They have no right of appeal.
On November 10, 1995, after a trial universally condemned as a sham and a sentence met with shock and outrage around the world, Ken Saro-Wiwa and 8 other Ogoni leaders were hanged by the Nigerian military government. Ken's last words were, "Lord, take my soul," but the struggle continues.
I urge all of you here to keep the pressure on Shell to accept the responsibility for what has happened in Ogoni and what is still happening.
At the heart of this case is a corporation's responsibility for human rights abuses that it paid for, encouraged, and conspired with a brutal military government to commit. This government was Shell's partner in its oil operations, and all of these human rights abuses accrued to Shell's benefit in suppressing dissent against Shell's operations.
More than a dozen years after the first lawsuit was filed to hold Shell accountable for its role in the crimes committed against the Ogoni people, the victims will finally have their day in court. Please visit wiwavshell.org to find out how you can help us keep a spotlight on this landmark trial for justice and corporate accountability.